Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares with the news from the global economy. Coming up, economic diversification in Gabon may harm biodiversity and threaten farming. And dispirited British pubs get a lifeline through new legislation. First, the headlines. Asian shares drifted higher on Monday, but gains were limited on fears of market volatility ahead of an expected rate hike in the U.S. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan was up 0.3%, boosted by a rally in Beijing. Japan's Nikkei stock index climbed 0.7%, ending at a 15-year high, up for its 7th straight session, helped by a weaker yen and better-than-expected April exports. U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen on Friday said the Fed would raise rates this year if the U.S. economy keeps improving as anticipated. She said she expected economic data to strengthen, noting that economic weakness at the start of the year was due to statistical noise. Beijing is inviting private investors to help fund, build, and operate more than 1,000 proposed projects to the tune of about $318 billion. The projects in sectors such as transport, water conservancy, and public services will be done as public-private partnerships. China's state planning agency did not say whether foreign firms would be included among the private investors. China is increasingly turning to public-private partnerships to fill a widening funding gap as it restricts off-balance sheet borrowing methods used by local authorities. Local government debt is estimated at around $3 trillion, but the crackdown may adversely impact existing projects. Greece cannot make debt repayments to the IMF next month unless it achieves a deal with creditors, its Interior Minister said. Interior Minister Nikos Foutsis told a Greek TV weekend show the 1.6 billion euros for the IMF in June will not be given and is not there to be given. After 4 months of talks with creditors, the leftist-led government is still scrambling for a deal that could release up to 7.2 billion euros to avert bankruptcy. The government is under pressure to agree to more cuts and reforms to secure the funding, but opposes measures that are incompatible with its campaign promises. The party's Central Committee on Sunday agreed that a deal should include low primary budget surpluses, no cuts in wages and pensions, a debt restructuring, and an investment program. Amazon.com started booking revenue from retail sales in individual European countries instead of funneling all sales through low-tax Luxembourg. EU regulators investigating Amazon said in January they believed the tax structure in Luxembourg could provide an unfair advantage over competitors. The move could significantly increase Amazon's tax bill across the EU as individual countries seek more tax to be paid within their borders. Amazon is also under pressure from other probes in Brussels, including an antitrust inquiry into e-commerce and an investigation into online platforms. Israel's gas saga continues as Antitrust Commissioner David Gillot, who aimed to break up the gas monopoly, resigns. Gillot retired on Monday, saying he faced strong resistance from within the government, who sought to promote the industry at all costs. Gas stocks jumped up following his announcement on Monday, with Delek Group up 3%, Avnel 3.5%, and Ratio 2% higher. Gillot aimed to change the market structure in order to generate genuine competition between the reservoirs in the natural gas market. Authorities in Gabon recently jumped at the chance to diversify their oil-dependent economy, but critics are alarmed at the environmental and social costs of the project, warning that it could wipe out biodiversity and threaten farming livelihoods.
The Batori rubber plantation and processing plant in the north of Gabon, a project of the Singapore-based Olam company, is set to bring in $400 million and thousands of jobs to the country, which has a 20% unemployment rate. As well, the project would serve to diversify a heavily oil-based economy, which takes about 70% of its revenue from energy exports. Indeed, the rubber plant seems a good idea.
When we have an agricultural project, it creates a lot of work. it brings with it rural development, and populations can stay rooted for a long time. Imagine, by the time the project is over, there will be around 3,000 people employed in the fields, and when you add the people working indirectly, it brings it up to around 5,000 people. And these people don't just work for 4 or 5 years. They work for 45 or 50 years.
There are downsides, though. Critics of the project have rung alarm bells about the social and environmental impacts. According to them, the plant could kill biodiversity in the tropical forest and pose a major threat to farmers in the former French colony of 1.7 million. Hasty environmental studies, fears that local farmers will be turned into laborers for the company, and what some workers say is unfair pay for their work at $260 a month. For many, the plantation's cons far outweigh its pros.
The licenses given to Olam were for exploration purposes only. This exploration permit should have required Olam to file reports on the state of resources in the area so that we can evaluate which zones should undergo deforestation. These reports have yet to be seen. No one has ever seen them.
With Olam, we've tried. You can be willing to work, but the way they treat us at work, on the ground, and the pay don't allow us to go any further.
Though Olam has signed so-called social contracts to bring electricity, water, and transportation infrastructure to the area, locals say that as more and more people come looking for work, the infrastructure is not enough.
And now for a quick look at what's new in the markets this week with financial currencies expert Joel Kruger. Mr. Kruger, how's it going?
Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So, the dollar's been recovering since last week. What exactly is behind this recovery?
So we saw a story midweek last week of the ECB that they announced they were going to be front-loading QE. It was a little bit of a conspiracy or a controversy.
Yeah.
They had announced it a little bit earlier in a private meeting, but that got the market going, got the euro selling off and the dollar going. And then late in the week, we saw U.S. CPI come in a lot higher than expected, growing at its fastest rate in 2 years. And then Yellen sort of confirmed that there's going to be a rate hike in 2015. So all of that sort of opened a fresh round of dollar buying.
Fantastic. So what exactly are the events of the week ahead, considering that we just mentioned the CPI and Janet Yellen? What else are we expecting this week?
So it's a kind of a quiet week. You know, we have the long weekend and the Memorial Day holiday. But looking beyond that, we have, looking out this week, we have U.S. durable goods on Tuesday, along with consumer confidence, U.S. consumer confidence. And then late in the week, we have Thursday some UK GDP. And then on Friday, we have U.S. GDP data.
Okay, and of course, we're slowly kind of seeping into June, which, you know, the Fed's now no longer such an issue, but certainly in terms of Greece, which is expecting to pay some money back to the IMF this week or next month.
Or maybe
what's
not.
happening there, or maybe not.
Right.
Do tell us.
So that's the question. Maybe not. I mean, over the weekend, there's been a lot of, back and forth. You know, you get a lot of messages from one side saying a deal is going to be done, and the other side doesn't know what's going on. The creditors. Over the weekend, Greece basically came out and said that we can't, and we're not going to make our next payment on June 5th. So that's putting a little pressure on.
A little, I imagine, on everybody included.
On everybody, yeah. Default, Grexit is back on the table, potential default, and all those worries and risk that goes along with that.
Grexit, not Grexident?
Possibly. It depends how you look at it.
Yeah. And in terms of gold, where's gold headed? So
gold is a market that I think has been underappreciated. I think that we see gold a lot higher. I think it needs to break back above the 1235 area, and then we're headed up above 1300. In an environment where you have such low interest rates, currency sort of battling for the weakest currency, and a record high equity market that's looking less than stable at these prices, gold becomes a nice alternative play.
Talking about interest rates, just in a last comment from you. I mean, where do you see the Fed heading with its rate hike? When should we expect it to happen?
So for me, it comes down to a variable that I think a lot of people are overlooking, and that's inflation. We saw it this past Friday. The Fed can take its time. People think they're going to push out to 2016.
Really?
We have a couple of months of data. I believe that if the next couple of months show CPI continuing to pick up and inflation continuing to pick up, it's going to put the pressure on the Fed to have to move in September of this year. That's where I stand.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think you stand with Janet Yellen, who seems to think that's going to head the same direction. Joel Kruger from JK on FX, thank you so very much for joining us in the show, and see you again next week.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Britain's traditional pubs have been on the decline, partially owing to a law forcing them to buy their spirits from their landlords. New legislation may now be able to save them from this crisis that has forced premises to shut down every week. Here's the story.
The local pub is one of Britain's most iconic industries. But with over 30 establishments closing their doors every week, It's a sector in peril. Many publicans have placed a large portion of the blame on their contracts with the companies that rent out pub premises, and as part of the deal, force tenants to buy their drinks through them.
It's been a perfect storm, and the beer tie has been an influential factor in that storm. So, you know, we would envisage it would improve the profitability of pubs. Even if they stay tight, their deal will be a better deal than it was before, or should be. And this is all, again, down to the behaviour of the pub companies and the brewers that are going to have to comply with this legislation.
Parliament has just passed a law that will allow pub operators the right to buy their beer on the open market. This will allow these contractually tied publicans to tackle their other major challenge, a change in UK drinking habits.
Premium is actually really important to people. I think they are very interested in quality, and they're really quite interested in something that's a natural product. Of course, over 90% of beer is pure water. So yes, there is that increasing interest, and I think that's the way that overall our industry is going. People are prepared to pay a little bit more for that quality.
Alcohol consumption in Britain has fallen around 18% in the past decade. Publicans will have to pull out all the stops if they're to halt the demise of the local watering hole.
And now for a look at some other stories and events from the world press in Media Watch. And we're joined by Daniel Roth. How's it going?
It's going okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, it's going okay because...
Well, famous economist, made famous in the movie A Beautiful Mind.
For the younger generation.
For the younger generation.
Aware of him.
John Nash
Yes.
won a Nobel Prize in 1994 for economics, was killed in a car crash over the weekend.
Tragic accident.
He and his wife, actually.
Of course, he was not young. He was 86 years old, but I mean, it was a freak accident, right?
It was really out of the blue. It was nobody was expecting it, but it sort of took people by surprise. Russell Crowe and Ron Howard, who made the film in 2001, which was the same year he actually got remarried to his former wife. They got married again.
Right.
Tweeted condolences and sadness, and but it's just it's big news in the world of economics because Nash was really important thinker. His recommendation letter for Princeton actually just had the sentence, "This man is a genius." Period. That was the sentence. That was it. So it's a big loss to the world. A big, beautiful mind.
Yes.
But moving on, The Guardian. The Guardian has this story that's very, very interesting. Maybe funny to some, maybe not to others. The Bank of England accidentally emailed The Guardian notification of a secret plan going on in the Bank of England.
Accidentally.
Yes,
this
accidentally.
Is unbelievable. How do you accidentally, well, I guess you do accidentally mail things, but this is unbelievable. It had to be secret. Do tell.
Right. This was basically looking at what the market and economic impacts of a Brexit, a British exit from the EU, would look like. So, of course, there's lots of bubbling, lots of talk about whether England is going to, whether they ought to. There will probably be a referendum. And the Bank of England has taken this very seriously, much more seriously than previously thought.
And if I'm not mistaken, actually, the document that was mailed to The Guardian included ways in which it could be hidden, so to speak, from the media.
Right, and yeah, so there was actually instructions. This plan and any talk of this needs to be hidden from the media. And I guess someone was trying to send it to George and got The Guardian. They typed in a G, hit the wrong.
The Guardian out of their address list there.
Yeah, but it's really, it's an interesting. It really shows how serious this conversation is.
There's no foul play here. Could it be that someone else maybe sent it?
It's entirely possible. Not only do we not know exactly how it made its way to The Guardian, we don't know yet the contents of the report. That's one of the things that's come out of this mistake. Yes. Is now we've got members of Parliament putting pressure on the Bank of England to publish this report. And it's important to remember the Bank of England sits apart from the government. Right. So it's not exactly that now they have to publish it because the government's telling them to, but there's a lot of pressure on them to do so.
Clearly. Okay. Well, moving on. What's the next topic
So there's a duel going on online. The Atlantic published a story about whether you need to be a jerk to get ahead in business. And,
I would say yes.
Well, so they said yes. Jezebel, which is an online magazine, said actually not so much. The conclusion, as with most things, that context matters. It matters when, where and where you're acting that way, who you're acting that way to, who you are, how people perceive you. At the
if you're
end
a
of the
pussycat,
day,
you won't be perceived as a jerk.
at the end of the day, it's all context.
Okay, well, Daniel Roth, you are not a jerk, but we're going to have to let you go here. Thanks so much for joining us. That is the end of our Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares. Thanks for watching, and join us again tomorrow for more on the economy.